Welcome back to the Arise News Hour. I'm Polly Middlehurst in London. Now, earlier we reported on Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe's efforts to calm things down in his ZANU-PF party ahead of the country's general election due next year. The public spat between the Vice President, Mnangagwa, seen here being sworn in by Robert Mugabe, and Zimbabwe's First Lady Grace Mugabe, is threatening to split the party that has ruled the country since 1980. It's thought that war veterans support Mugabe's deputy, while technocrats and the Youth League support a faction supporting Mugabe's wife, Grace Mugabe, seen there on the right of your picture. Well, we're joined now in the Arise News studio by African political analyst and founder of the UK-based Africa Public Policy Research Institute, Lloyd Msipa, and of course to join our discussion, Arise News correspondent Tam Sankajo to discuss this story as well. Very many thanks for coming into the Arise News studio, Lloyd, to help us pick apart this story. If you were to put some jigsaw pieces on the table, what would you say would be the most important components of what's happening right now in Zimbabwe?
From the way I look at it, what will probably happen in reading into this whole thing, I think unity is the key thing, because we look at a situation where a party is imploding, but is heading towards elections. And what will probably happen, as you know, a lot of people think that maybe Mnangagwa will be expelled from ZANU-PF. That is not likely to happen, because for starters, Mugabe needs Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa is respected in two key provinces, Masvingo and in the Midlands. And because we're going towards elections, you will need Mnangagwa to be at his, doing his job. What will probably happen, because tensions are now so high, Mugabe may probably seek to de-escalate the situation, maybe reshuffle the top team and put Mnangagwa somewhere where he will still do the same job that he's doing, but not as vice president. Because it's very difficult to see how Mnangagwa is going to continue to work with the president's wife after what happened the last 2 days.
I mean, what I've been reading is that at every political and public opportunity, Mugabe and his wife, Grace Mugabe, have decried the actions of this man. They really don't want him to be president, do they? Are we talking here about a personal battle between these two men?
Yes.
That goes back a long way in ZANU-PF's history?
Mnangagwa has been with Mugabe for a long time, over 55 years. And they both know each other very well. They've rescued each other in various situations. Mnangagwa has lost 3 times to opposition leader in Kwekwe, which is a small town where he comes from. That's in the Midlands. And Mugabe rescued him and appointed him Speaker of the House. At the same time, in 2008, you know the standoff between Mugabe and Tsvangirai, where it appeared Tsvangirai actually won the election. And it was Mnangagwa who actually recognized that there was a clause in the constitution that could provide for a rerun. So you see, these two people, come a long way. It is not possible. I don't actually see the possibility of Mugabe saying, look, I'm kicking Mnangagwa out, because they do need each other. And for the purposes of moving forward, you will need Mnangagwa to be in Masvingo and in the Midlands as ZANU-PF cadre. So,
but as you say, he can't work with Grace Mugabe, so how is that going to work?
You cannot work with Grace Mugabe. The de-escalation will probably involve Mnangagwa taking a lesser role. There is a possibility that he will reshuffle the team and get Mnangagwa out of the vice presidency and put in somewhere else, and then put somebody else there. So that will completely de-escalate this whole story that Mnangagwa is gunning for the top job. Now, the million-dollar question is, how is Mnangagwa going to react to such a demotion? Because he was demoted before in the past, probably was it 2000?
2004.
2004, when Mujuru was elevated and he was appointed housing minister. That was a demotion. Okay, he took it in his stride and he carried on working. The question is, Mnangagwa is what, 75, 76 now? So if he doesn't become president this time around, that is it. That closes the chapter.
Let's ask Tam Sanka for his opinion on that. I mean, he's known as the crocodile, isn't he? He plays the long game. He's got 20 years on Robert Mugabe, even though, as you say, he's in his 70s. What do you think his game plan is now?
It's very difficult to tell because he's a man who normally doesn't speak a lot. And even when he does the press conferences that he has been doing, it's not many of them. And they come at the back of what appears to have been cohesion from the president for him to actually explain himself out. In this particular, the latest one, it was because there had been allegations when he was airlifted to South Africa, when he became unwell in Gwanda at a youth rally, that he had been poisoned. And there were, there was media speculation that he could have been poisoned because of the ice cream. And where was that ice cream coming from? It was coming from the dairy that is owned by the First family. So
Grace
that,
Mugabe has
yeah, so he was
allegations.
asked, so he was asked to explain himself out. And of course, even when he did, it was not quite clear. But Robert Mugabe was saying that Mnangagwa is a lawyer, and a lawyer that is very difficult to pin down. He cited quite a number of issues. In 2004, that Lloyd is mentioning, he was implicated in something called the Cholocho Declaration, which is where a number of key senior figures within ZANU-PF are understood to had come up with a plan of regionalizing the leadership of the party and get rid of the president, Robert Mugabe. But even at that point, Emmerson Mnangagwa is the one that stayed when others were temporarily suspended, because Mugabe said, even if it's clear everyone is saying that, there is nothing there that you can actually pin down on him. So now I think this is a big battle between the First Lady and the Vice President.
Lloyd, let's focus on that battle between the First Lady and Mnangagwa. I mean, is he going to be satisfied with a lesser position to appease her own ambitions?
One thing a lot of people don't realize, or probably into Mnangagwa, is a very deeply loyal man, very loyal to President Mugabe. And that loyalty goes back from the days when he was his personal assistant, from the time he left Zambia and came to join him in Zimbabwe. So that loyalty, is seen by the way he has conducted himself. He has literally taken every, type of abuse thrown at him. In this particular instance, if you've noticed the way he responded to the issue of the poisoning, he has stated clearly that I was poisoned, but the poisoning didn't come through the food. It came through something else, but the man was poisoned. The First Lady...
Food poisoning has been suggested, just
it has been suggested, yes.
Yeah.
Right. The first thing the First Lady did was go on TV and say, we don't need this guy. She ranted all. I'm sure it's in the public domain. Whether they work together...
Well, it comes down to whether Robert Mugabe can control Grace Mugabe, doesn't it?
Yes. That's another key thing. Robert Mugabe has pretty much given his wife, to run the whole thing altogether, free reign.
Yeah.
And from what I see, I understand there's another conference this afternoon which Mugabe and Grace addressed, and President Mugabe suggested that he'll be reshuffling his cabinet. From what I read into that, he's probably going to try and take Mnangagwa away, from Grace's, pathway, which may include, give him a lesser post. Maybe take him back to the Minister of Justice permanently and give the Vice President to somebody else. Either way, he cannot afford to lose. This is his wife we're talking about, and there is a man he has worked with for so many years. He cannot lose either of the two. And
let's not forget, Mnangagwa does have the support of war veterans, the intelligence community, the military. Grace Mugabe's up against quite a guy with quite a strong hand, isn't she?
The military and the war veterans support Mnangagwa. There's no question about that. And that is the reason why Mugabe will not go to the extent of getting rid of Mnangagwa, because he knows if that happens, then the war veterans and the army would immediately, encircle to protect him.
Tam, you're nodding at that, you agree?
Yeah, one thing that I find very interesting is behind all these squabbles, Joyce Mjuru, we saw the same thing happening. People spoke about the brilliance of the strategies behind, led by people like Professor Jonathan Moyo and others, and it's actually being seen as the case in this particular instance. But behind all this, the ZANU-PF power base appears to have moved towards the youth league, with people like Kudzi Chipanga actually taking over, because he's the one that was behind, or they were the ones that were behind the Million Man March that transformed the politics in Zimbabwe. Because up and until that point, there was an understanding that the opposition had an opportunity and a chance. And then they came up with all these interface rallies where more than 50, 60,000 people have been attending. So whatever the result of the election, it will be difficult to say that ZANU-PF does not have support in the country. So the dynamics have actually changed, which is why probably the First Lady and those that support her believe that the ex-combatants, the Vice President Mnangagwa, their power base is something that can be pushed aside because the Youth League is now in place to replace them.
And Lloyd, what about the African Union or the Southern African Development Community? What's their position on this? Are they interfering or are they standing back?
The African Union and SADC, the position of those are our regional institutions. They will not interfere in as far as whatever is taking place is a democratic process. But let's say in the event that maybe one of the parties decides to force themselves into the leadership minus elections, then they will be seen to be more active. They have been active in the past when we had, for example, the dispute in the elections. They came in, through Thabo Mbeki and settled that. But what we have now is a country that is moving towards elections next year. And as Tammy said, the population in Zimbabwe, 60% are under the age of 25. They are considered the youth. So Mugabe has lost the support of the war veterans. So what he has done with whatever resources he has now taken these youths and said to them, look, we'll give you this, but we want you to be the future leaders of this party. But I struggle with that proposal in the sense that, you see, ZANU-PF is a revolutionary party. It was born out of the struggle. And it is not possible for the youth to take over a party that is so deep-rooted in the struggle and exclude war veterans and Mnangagwa. See, they are the custodians. You see, Mugabe himself... It's
a different culture, really, isn't it?
It's a different culture, yes. Mugabe joined ZANU-PF in his 50s. But these other guys, the war veterans, they've been with the party since they were 14, 16, things like that.
Let me just put this last question to you, because we are running out of time. Robert Mugabe is the world's oldest leader. He may live, he may not. If he doesn't, will there be a constitutionally ordered race for power, or do you see Zimbabwe slipping?
Because of the regional institutions that we have some kind of protection. But then again, it will probably happen after something has happened internally. We've got two major factions. Mugabe dies today. There's going to be some kind of constitutional crisis, obviously. Yes, we've got the ZANU-PF constitution, which actually equates the two vice presidents, Mnangagwa and Pelegezela Mpoko. And what it says is that both of them are actually equal and can actually be presidents at the same time. There's a problem with that because Mpoko comes from the minority Ndebele tribe. And tradition and history, we've never had a president from that minority tribe. At the same time, Mnangagwa is coming from the Karanga tribe, which is roughly a cross between Shona and Ndebele, and they are in the Midlands. He is trying to say, look, I've been with Mugabe the longest, I've worked with this man the longest. Surely, by all reasonable sense, I should be taking over this thing. That's where the problem is. So Grace is a new arrival. All the people she works with, Kasukwere, Jonathan Moyo, all these are people who just joined ZANU. They're not, see, they're new to this thing, and it's a revolutionary party. The real custodians are the ones they're trying to kick out. That's the impression that, that's what I read into it.
Lloyd Msipa and Tam Sankajo, thank you both very much indeed.
You're welcome.